right, ladies and gents, we're going to be looking at a couple things today. In particular, we are looking at our annotations and our analysis of primary sources. And so when I go in today's folders, I'm checking out our primary sources key that I have posted for you. And within here, you'll see, once it loads, that I have the video right here, which is what you are watching and listening to. But basically, there's a couple different sources that I want you to take a look at. And so we are looking at primary sources for the second time now in this course. And it's so important that we really break it down step by step. And so I want, before we even start looking at these primary sources, to first keep in mind something called free will. And free will is the ability to have choice in the decisions in your life. And there are consequences for those choices. However, you still have the choice. And so when we are looking at these sources, that's something that you have to keep in the back of your mind, is this concept of free will. And that's because we have two groups of people that the concept of free will that will come up. So the first group of people that we're going to look at is indentured servants. And so we're looking at a primary source that was written in the time period in which we're studying. So in this case, the first one, document A, is looking at a year of 1627, in July actually. And so for the first source, document A, it is a contract, and a contract is a legally binding document between two parties. Both parties agree upon that contract, and so both parties have a say in what is decided. And so this contract has to deal with Richard Lather and Edward Hurd. And basically, when we look at it and break it down step by step and make our annotations, we're finding out that Richard is agreeing to be a servant for 4 years. So he is agreeing to work for Edward, and Edward is promising then to take care of him, to provide sufficient foods and drinks and clothing and any other necessaries to make sure that he is healthy and able to survive for 4 years. So both parties, so Richard and Edward, have agreed upon this. And at the conclusion of his 4 years of service, he is going to receive 50 acres of land in Virginia and his freedom. So going back to this concept of free will, this particular situation, this indentured servant has free will. He has a choice. He has agreed upon this contract and the terms of the contract. Looking at document B, we have a first-hand account. In this case, it's an example of a letter. And it's a letter to a parents from a 16-year-old who has become an indentured servant. And so this particular person is explaining the living conditions, which are poor, not well, that they have not such great food. He talks about gruel a couple times, the peas and things like that that he had to endure. He explains that meat and venison was promised, but that never actually came to be. And so he's really explaining that things aren't great. And so I want you to think about these living conditions and realize that, yes, they are not perfect. However, again, an indentured servant has a contract, a legally binding document, and this document allows the two parties to agree on it. So this individual who's writing this letter, even though the conditions may have been miserable, as the annotations allude to, right, and the letter alludes to, it's still a choice. So this individual had the ability to choose yes or no, that they wanted this as their fate. And even though he was beaten and treated poorly, he had a choice in the matter. So that's important. So let's take a look at C and D now. These are two accounts of bills of sale. And when we look at these details, we find out in document C, we have a 9-year-old that was sold. Excuse me, a 9-year-old who was sold, and he was sold for life. This young boy had no choice in the matter and no free will. So a stark difference from our indentured servants. Looking at document D, same thing. This is an announcement. Again, we have a listing of a public auction. So someone has passed away and all of his materials are being sold. And so in this example, we have cattle and horses, we have household goods that are being sold, and then shockingly, we have people that are listed here. And these individuals, again, have no free will. They have no choice. Their fate has been determined for them, and it's for life. A stark difference from our indentured servants who have a short, relatively short service, 4 to 7 years, and our enslaved peoples are for life. And again, there is no choice that has been robbed and stripped from them. The last account then is document E, which is firsthand experience, firsthand account of someone who was kidnapped and then enslaved. And again, just to reiterate, when we look at our annotations, we're looking at some details. We're finding that this person was renamed, kidnapped, taken from his home, sold, resold, beaten, and treated under the most inhumane conditions. So as a 9-year-old, he was forced to do hard labor, as we read. He was whipped and beaten, and he was also separated and sold from his family. So this is stark differences from that of our indentured servants. Indentured servants had a choice, enslaved peoples did not. Indentured servants were treated better than many of the enslaved peoples. So when you're making your comparisons and contrasts, keep those details in mind.